Hi, this is Jessica. Welcome to my new channel. I'm gonna make an immersive English learning channel. Let's practice speaking English with me. Well, let's start the topic in part 2. Describe something that you did with someone or with a group of people. Well, I think that working with a group of people is like a great way for us to build relationships, discover unrecognized talents, and influence others in a positive way. And right now, I'm working at a CPA firm, and our job is to audit a variety of companies and issue the audit report. Recently, I completed a project with the group of 2 colleagues together. The company that we are providing service with is a pretty tough case with very complex business model, a variety of sales channel, as well as a really large sales value. It happened that the company has just changed their accounting system in the middle of the year. Consequently, they have more than one version of general ledger and a relevant supporting files, and every version of general ledger are in different formats. Thus, we have to even take twice the time, to process all those documents. Besides, the time is also pretty tight on this project. Thus, it seems like it was a really big undertaking for all of us in the team, and the workload is huge to us. How do we do that? Well, initially we just spent much of my time planning for this project, processing all those documents provided by the client, as well as preparing inquiry lists to asking for further information from the client. We work together to understand the client's business, understand their business model, discover their internal control risk and potential risk of misstating the financial report. We sort through their relevant and supporting documents, giving the further audit adjustments to their financial report, and finally issuing our audit report. It was a lot of work, but finally we nailed it and we made that deadline. So who I am working with? Well, I work with 2 colleagues together in a team. We were in the same level in this company, and we have similar working experiences in auditing. However, we have different strengths and skills. Thus, we are complementary to each other. We could be able to combine all those advantages and skills together to make something perfectly. We support each other and share each other's workload, as well as relieve each other's mental pressure. We often have the brainstorming together, and while we could support each other and solve each other's problem, we are pretty proactive towards work, and we are willing to give and take in this project. Thus, we work efficiently and perfectly, and finally we could meet deadline, and all of us bonded up this project. If you ask me the reason why we work for this project, I think it was simply just because of the following 3 reasons. Well, firstly, obviously, it is a project assigned by our boss. Probably just because, this project is pretty tough, and all of us have a good reputation of being reliable and responsible. Thus, we were assigned together for this case. Secondly, all of us were willing to take more challenge. Being in a team means that we are going to be the leader of ourselves. While working in this group means that we voluntarily become the leaders. We're not the leader of each other, though. We don't have any boss to guide us. So when we come across some difficulties, we have to solve by ourselves. We have quite a lot of skills and knowledge that we will never ever learn on our own. Finally, it was such a great feeling of accomplishment to see the finished work, and we can work together to get things done. I'm so glad that I have opportunity to work in a group, to get my work done. It was really a good experience. That's all. Well, based on my experience, the part 3 determines whether you can get a high score or not. So I know that there are only no more than 5 minutes for part 3 in IELTS speaking part, but try to extend your answer as long as you can. So in the practice for part 3, try to use various of logic structure to construct your answer. Well, let me give you several examples in part 3. So usually, I would be very polite and nice when I come across them in the stairway or in the lift. Or sometimes when I come across them in the lobby, in the ground floor, I would directly say hi to them or just give them a smile. However, I always keep a distant attitude towards my neighbors. I even don't know who live next door. I don't know their name. I even don't know how many people live in that apartment, letting alone having an occasional conversation with them. And sometimes it's even a little bit awkward, to come across them in a lift. So usually if I want to go outside, once I was about to open the door, as long as I hear some voice, outside, sounds like some neighbors would go outside from their apartment, probably I would wait for a few seconds after they taking off, and then I would open the door. I know that I'm trying to avoid neighbors, probably simply just because right now our living pattern has tremendously changed compared with so many years ago. In the past, people always live in a cottage or in a familiar neighborhood or community. Everyone knows each other, but right now, most of us are living in those high-rise buildings, or we moved often. Some people just move to the new city, some people just rent apartment from one place to another place, and also those high-rise buildings have pretty large popularity density as well as a pretty high plot ratio. Thus, it is really hard for us, to recognize every single one living in the same neighborhood. And right now, majority of us adopt this kind of a 996 lifestyle. We're quite busy at work. We don't even get time, to go outside or to bond or build a really good relationship with our neighbors. That people tend to be way more indifferent to neighbors. In my distant memory, when I was a kid, I lived with my grandparents in a community where majority of our neighbors know each other because they were the former colleagues or the colleagues to my grandparents. Thus, we were so friendly with each other, and we often support each other by just lending some small things. For example, sometimes when my grandparents lacks the seasonings or vegetables, they would directly look opposite neighbor's door and ask them to have those salt, to have sugar, to have ginger or lettuce, something like that. And in return, sometimes my grandparents would make dumplings and cookies and send to the neighbors as well. And sometimes, when you're out of battery, and it's happened that the neighbor's son know how to fix those electricity or fix the furniture, and you can ask them, support you to some extent as well. That was like we can support each other in a small way. That was how I witnessed, neighbors would try to support each other in the past. However, as time goes by, right now, I have grown up. I'm living in another city far away from my hometown. I just found out that it was really hard for me, to build a relationship with neighbors. So if you ask me how neighbors help each other, I have to say that I have no idea, because normally I feel like it's really embarrassing to knock the neighbor's door and to ask them, borrow some sugars, because right now, there are all kinds of 24/7 convenience stores nearby in the corner. You would use no more than a few minutes to go outside and buying whatever you want. And right now, I know that especially in mainland China, it was really efficient delivery apps that you can directly buy whatever you want, and those delivery men will deliver those products to your door in no more than a few minutes as well. So you don't need your neighbors anymore, and you don't need your neighbors' help. This is how I always construe. However, I changed my mind once when I got stuck in Wuhan because of outburst of COVID-19 in 2020. That I got stuck in my parents' home together, and back then, because we were so afraid what was happening outside, there were unknown virus spreading all over the whole city. We have no idea what was happening. We dare not to go outside, but we have to live, we have to eat things, we have to intake vegetables, food, meat, rice. Sometimes you lack certain things, and sometimes you're dying for the berry drinks like Coca-Cola. You're dying for the snacks. You just want to have them. And this time, you just realize how important your neighbors can be. And I remember that I always ask for support from all those neighbors via the group chat on WeChat. So those neighbors in our community were so friendly and supportive to each other. We just exchanged daily necessities with each other. And I remember vividly once that both my grandparents have to use the oxygen machine, but we only have one. Thus my mom asked on the neighborhood group chat who had another oxygen machine, and in no more than a few seconds, my neighbor told me that they have one. So they literally saved my family's life. While this just remind me of the Chinese old saying goes, the good neighbor is way better than brother far away. You see, that's how I understand this question. Normally, the society pattern in the countryside and in the city are totally different. In the countryside, people tend to know each other. People tend to be familiar with each other because they live in the same community for years. They come to know each other for years. You know your neighbors like when you were little, and they have a pretty low immigration mobility rate compared to big cities. That in most of all those big cities, such as in Shanghai, in Beijing, Hong Kong, in your city, there are a variety of immigration workers. Majority of them would study or work in a new city, and then they would move to another place. And sometimes you move from one region to another region in the same city as well, probably because you don't have the ownership of your apartment. For majority of those newcomers, you always have to rent an apartment instead of purchasing apartment. That's sometimes it is hard for you to get to know your neighbors. And if you don't get familiar with your neighbors, if you don't even know your neighbors, it's really hard to lend a hand to them. It is really hard to support them. A second reason I think is something to do with the construction of infrastructure. Normally in the outskirts, there is no good public facilities. And the third industry, namely the service industry, is not that booming. So I mean that normally in those countryside, you don't have 24/7 stores nearby. You only have some, small stores, supermarket nearby. Well, they can only open from 10 a.m., to 8 p.m. Or if you want to buy something, in the late evening, so you have to ask for your neighbor's help. And also, in comparison in the big cities, you have a delivery apps, you have 24/7 stores, you have your doorman in those high-rise buildings who could be able, to help you to install light bulbs, something like that. So in those big cities, you don't need anyone's help. But in the countryside, sometimes you have to rely on your neighbor's support to help each other, support each other, to do certain things. So if you ever have some trouble with the English speaking part and you want to get your ideal score in your IELTS speaking part, don't forget to subscribe my channel and ring the bell. You will not miss my updates.